Good afternoon. I'm Betty Casey, editor of Tulsa Kids Magazine, and we're here for our monthly discussion called Dismantling Racism. We do it every the third Wednesday at noon in partnership with OSU Tulsa and with Tri-City Collective. So I want to welcome everyone to our discussion today. I think this is going to be exciting. It is National Women's History Month, so we have some amazing women here to talk with us. And before I introduce our panelists, I want to introduce our moderator, who is always here, Quraysh Ali Lansana. He is the author of 20 books in poetry, nonfiction, and children's literature. He's currently a Tulsa Artist Fellow and serves as acting director of the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation at Oklahoma State University, Tulsa, where he is also a writer in residence for the Center for Poets and Writers and adjunct professor in Africana Studies in English. Lansana is creator and executive producer of KOSU NPR's Focus, Black Oklahoma's monthly radio program. Former faculty member of both the writing program of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the drama division of the Juilliard School. Lansana served as director of the Gwendolyn Brooks Center for Black Literature and Creative Writing at Chicago State University from 2002 to 2012, and was associate professor of English creative writing there until 2014. His work, Our Difficult Sunlight, A Guide to Poetry, Literacy, and Social Justice in Classroom and Community, was published in 2011 by Teachers and Writers Collaborative and was a 2012 NAACP Image Award nominee. His most recent books include The Skin of Dreams, New and Collected Poems, 1995 to 2018, The Whiskey of Our Discontent, Gwendolyn Brooks as Conscious and Change Agent, and The Breakfast Poets, New American Poetry in the Age of Hip Hop. And Lansana's work appears in Best American Poetry 2019, and his forthcoming titles include Those Who Stayed Life in 1921 Tulsa After the Massacre and Opal's Greenwood Oasis, which is a children's book. He's founding member of Tri-City Collective. So welcome, Q, and we look forward to your moderation of this great panel. Let me introduce our panelists today. We have Vanessa Hall-Harper. She's a Tulsa native who graduated from Edison. She attended Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, where she earned a degree in political science pre-law in 1993. She also has a certificate in paralegal studies from the University of Tulsa. She returned to school to get an MSM degree which is a Master of Science in Management. Ms. Hall-Harper is currently a manager for the Tulsa Health Department and a political science adjunct professor at Tulsa Community College. She's been married for 25 years to TPD Lieutenant Marcus Harper, and they have one daughter, Kaylin. Vanessa has worked over 25 years in the Tulsa County system, and prior to her work in public health, she was an intake counselor at the Tulsa County Juvenile Bureau. She is a community activist and volunteer who is passionate about uplifting her community. She has been involved in several community initiatives, boards, committees, and in the creation of the African American Affairs Commission within the City of Tulsa infrastructure. In addition, Vanessa has led a successful campaign for a moratorium on discount dollar stores and the implementation of a healthy neighborhoods overlay to address the proliferation of dollar stores in District 1. She further addressed the food security problem in District 1 by bringing a quality grocery to District 1, which broke ground in July 2020. She's a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. So welcome. We also have Dr. Tiffany Crutcher. She is a native Tulsan as well, who was thrust into the national spotlight following the death of her twin brother, Terrence Crutcher, who was shot by a police officer in Tulsa while holding his hands in the air. The murder of her brother compelled Tiffany to speak out against police brutality, particularly the killing of unarmed Black men. Crutcher is the founder of the Terrence Crutcher Foundation and the Demanding a Just Tulsa Coalition. The foundation's primary focus is criminal justice and policing reform, providing scholarships to African American students, community and youth development, and policy advocacy. She is a proud HBCU graduate, where she received a BA, MS, and a clinical doctorate from Langston University and Alabama State. She's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and a graduate of the James W. Wright Leadership Development Institute in Montgomery, Alabama. Dr. Crutcher currently serves on the Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, Metcare's Foundation, Historic Greenwood Main Street, and Justice for Greenwood Foundation Board of Directors. She's also a member of the United Justice Coalition and a founding member of Sisters of the Movement, both national organizations. In 2018, Dr. Crutcher created the Tulsa Community Remembrance Coalition in partnership with Mr. Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. It's committed to ending mass incarcerations and excessive punishment in the United States, challenging racial and economic injustice, and protecting basic human rights in American society. The partnership is committed to changing the narrative about race in America. The Tulsa Community Remembrance Coalition, under the leadership of Dr. Crutcher, will lead a mass effort to memorialize the victims of lynching and racial terror in Oklahoma and empower citizens to confront issues of racism with the goal of overcoming racial inequality through the building of the city of Tulsa's first comprehensive memorial and community remembrance work. Welcome to you, Dr. Crutcher. Our third panelist is Alicia Andrews. She is now serving her first term as chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. Most recently, she served one term as the secretary of the Tulsa Democratic Party. As a staffer on the 2018 coordinated campaign, she was privy to the party structure on a statewide level and was compelled to run. Alicia has long been an advocate for causes she believes in. She volunteered for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Green Country and canvassed for several campaigns. She is currently a realtor with corporate background in strategic planning. She was raised in the Oklahoma City metro area, graduated from high school in Tulsa, and ultimately graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a BA in psychology. In addition to her corporate work, Alicia ran a consulting firm specializing in writing business plans for bank financing for startups throughout Oklahoma. Her motto is, "I want to ensure that everyone has free and fair access to the ballot box, are educated when they get there, and that their vote counts," which I love that motto because National Women's History Month, our theme is Valiant Women of the Vote, refusing to be silenced. And women did get the vote in 1920 with the 19th Amendment. So welcome everyone, and Q, I will let you get started.
Well, I don't think we have time for a show today because these women's bios are so powerful and so comprehensive and amazing that I think that's all the time we have today. So thank you all and good night. Now, thank you all for being here. I am honored to be with the three of you and with Betty, as always, monthly for this discussion about BIPOC women in power, BIPOC women in politics. And I was waiting to hear if Alicia was an AKA as well. So I made sure that my older siblings, my older sisters would be sufficiently upset because they're all Deltas. So, so I wanted to, make sure there was some balance. Alicia, you got anything you need to tell us? No? Okay. All right. Just want to check. Thank you all again. And what'd you say? And I love the fact as well about the two of you went to have degrees from HBCUs, because I do not, but I did not attend an HBCU. But I am very excited about the presence of the renewed energy surrounding HBCUs. And I've been watching Prime coach your alma mater every weekend with great excitement. And the fact that HBCU athletics are recruiting or drawing or attracting 5-star, 4-star recruits from all over the place, and that brings me a great deal of hope and excitement. So, but that's another thing. So we'll get back to that in a minute. I want to start with this quote. and get your opinions on sort of your interpretations on this quote in terms of its resonance today, right? And the quote is from the great Shirley Chisholm, who was the first woman and the first Black to ever run for the United States presidency, presidency of the United States. And her quote, one of her most famous quotes, she had many, right, was, "If there's not a seat at the table, bring a folding chair," right? How, and she said that was almost 70 years, 75 years ago, y'all, when she said that, right? How does that quote resonate? How do you interpret that quote in 2021?
So if I may start.
Yeah, please.
I want to address Ms. Casey's comment that women got the right to vote 100 years ago. I want to clear that up and say that white women got the right to vote 100 years ago. Black women have had the right to vote just over 55 years. And so that's a very clear distinction, you know, considering our topic. But regarding bring a folding chair, I say that all the time because I'm always out in the community talking to folks from underrepresented communities, primarily saying, you know, you've got to vote. And I get a lot of, they're not thinking about my issue, they're not addressing my, I'm saying, you can't, no one's talking about your issue unless you're talking about your issue. You have to have a seat at the table. And people say, well, I don't even know how to get to the table. And I say, bring your folding chair. You know, I say that all the time because it is about having a voice, and no one's going to advocate for you as well as you will. And so I'm always encouraging people, drag that folding chair over there and squeeze in. Sit on somebody's lap if you have to.
Dr. Crutcher, Councilwoman Harper, you want to go next?
I'll jump in. I know that Councilor Hall-Harper is itching to speak on Shirley Chisholm. However, first, let me just say I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Ms. Betty Casey. Thank you so much for this platform, and to Quraysh, thank you so much for just all the work that you do. You've definitely been a light in the community, and of course, I have to acknowledge that I'm just honored to be or serve on this panel with two of the first Black women, the first Black African-American chairwoman of the Tulsa City Council, and the first chairwoman of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. And so we have to make sure that we acknowledge that. And so I'm just so honored to be here. I love that quote, and it's one thing just to quote it, but it's another thing to actually put it into action. And I tend to add on to that quote, Q. I don't just bring a folding chair, because a lot of times the tables, they create these illusions of inclusion. So I've started to create my own table, a table that will actually allow me to speak and allow my voice to be heard. A lot of people say, let's collaborate, but we're never truly invited to the table. You may have one of us, and then when we do speak, you know, those words fall on deaf ears. And so what we've decided to do as a community after the killing of my brother, and after a lot of the rally cries at City Hall, when we decided that we weren't going to be heard, even though we tried to make the powers that be hear us, we decided to create our own table. In my bio, I never really put, but I was a senior campaign advisor for Greg Robinson and his historic run for mayor. And I think we inspired a lot of Tulsans on last summer. And so I believe in adding to Shirley Chisholm's quote, we got to create our own table.
Councilor? You got to unmute.
I hit it, it just didn't click on. I agree 100%. Shirley Chisholm is my shero. My mantra for my campaign is unbought and unbossed. And that is something that I stole from Shirley Chisholm because it speaks volumes. But as far as that quote is concerned, I agree 100%. But you know, Alicia said, she said she uses that term. I kind of expand on that term. I say raise pure D hell. Same thing, right? Bring the chair, but we got to do more than bringing chairs. To Dr. Crutcher's point, there are in too many situations where there is this illusion of inclusion, where we have one or two Black people invited to participate, and then they are allowed by the power structure to be the voice for the entire community, the entire Black community. oftentimes the reason why they're invited is because they're going to maintain status quo. And so those people who are going to really push the hard issues, that's going to speak truth to power and speak to those things and say those things that make people uncomfortable, those aren't the people that are invited to the table, oftentimes, unfortunately, but that's just the reality of what we're dealing with today. And so, yes, I 100% concur and agree, but the way I put it is raise hell and get into a lot of good trouble.
And bringing John Lewis into the mix too. So to that end, right? Yeah, there you go. To that end, right? If she said that quote almost 75 years ago, and we are now in a moment where there's legislation being passed in just about every state in this country, including the one in which we reside, that is rolling back, right? There was already voter suppression. Now we have bills that are essentially Jim Crow era legislation to stop people of color and Black folks specifically from voting. How far removed are we from the time in which Miss Shirley was making her run? What has changed?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you know, and I get a lot of criticisms for saying those things because there are those in Tulsa that believe, oh, well, we're making a lot of progress. We're making a lot of headway. But then when we really think about it, when we really look at the numbers, the statistics, the studies, the disparities, are we really changing anything, or are we just coming together wanting to sing Kumbaya for these instances of symbolism, right? We want to look like we're doing something without actually changing anything, without actually moving the needle and changing people's lives. And so again, that's just one of those things. I've been labeled as divisive, as I'm sure some of my other ladies that's on this call have been labeled as divisive, because we tend to want to speak truth to power and say, no, that's not going to work. I'm not going to show up just to put a smiley face or paint the barn or lipstick on a pig when we have issues that we are faced with in this community that are detrimental to lives, to community. And so, you know, it's one of those things. What has changed? We have to continue to ask that question. What has changed? And unfortunately, in my view, not much from 75 years ago or even from 100 years ago.
And go ahead, Miss Alicia, go ahead.
Put a different slant on it. We are where we were 75 years ago, but I think it's because there was a change. They're looking around and seeing what happened in Michigan and what happened in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania and what happened in Georgia, and they're terrified. They saw that African Americans showed up in record numbers and voted. They showed up early and they waited, even though all kinds of suppressive tactics were employed. And a lot of the bills that are happening all over the nation, and even in Oklahoma, where they got their way, so leave us alone, but even in Oklahoma, it's because they are afraid. They see that there is a possibility. They see that African Americans all over the country are seeing the light and valuing their vote, and they're really concerned. Oh my gosh, what if Oklahoma African Americans hear this? They might want to vote and have their vote count. So I would say that I respect Councilor Hall-Harper immensely, and I don't mean to be a contrarian, but we are exactly where we were 75 years ago, but I think it's as a result of change and a result of fear of change.
Dr. Crutcher?
I don't really have anything to add. I'll just fall right into the middle of these ladies and just simply say nothing has changed. And the fact that I was at the March on Washington this past summer, fighting for the exact same thing that Martin Luther King and John Lewis was fighting for over a half of a century ago tells you, I mean, we were fighting and marching to reinstate the John Lewis Voting Act. And so that should say a lot within itself. So I agree with both of these women.
Go ahead, Betty, you're muted.
Sorry. I have a question, because I do notice that fear, and it's a reaction. And Councilor Hall-Harper mentioned being sort of invited to the table, but it's the powers that be may pick and choose who those people are that are invited to the table. And I also see that, having been in this community many, many years. How do we overcome that? And getting to the point of fear, there's a lot of money and PR push behind stoking that fear, and there's a lot of social media that happens to stoke that fear. How do we overcome that? Or do you have any suggestions for that?
Well, I think that I'll just jump in, Betty. White media and mainstream media, they control the narrative. And so what we have to get better at doing is controlling the narrative, and the people and the power structures and the generous philanthropic community that we do have here in Tulsa, they need to start undergirding and supporting more Black media, more writers, more journalists, so that the truth can be told and so that our stories can be told the right way. A lot of times people are telling our stories for us and doing things without us. And even the lawmakers right now, they're passing a lot of laws, and there's a communication gap between the State House and the people most impacted by a lot of the issues that we deal with. And we have to get good at trying to fill those gaps from a communication standpoint and support a lot of the Black media, the Black leaders, the Black businesses. And we don't do that enough because we call it tokenism. We pick one Black person, as Councilor Hall-Harper says, who's going to help preserve the status quo, going to help preserve the power structure's economic status, and to keep the problems perpetuated. We really don't want to solve the problem. We have all these solutions, but if there's no problems, then there's no need for the power structure to continue to make money and profit off of prisons and profit off of poor people. And so I think that we really have to look at who we support and what we're supporting and the narratives that we're supporting, and really put a racial or equity lens on everything it is that we do, because there's so many gaps as it relates to what's happening. I'd like to bring up the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. I know a lot of people support the commission, but if you really look at it from an equity lens and look at it for what it is, and look at the people who serve on that commission, and we say we stand for righteousness, we say we stand for justice, but look at the people. We're talking about voting right now. And Senator James Langford has centered himself on the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Commission, someone who was a part of a group who decided that he wanted to reject the election results that Black women led the work. They were on the ground. Stacey Abrams, I can go on and on and on. Tasha Brown, even the people right here on this call fighting hard. And you simply told us that our votes didn't matter. You further marginalized a race of people who's been fighting for years, but yet you want to center yourself and tell us how we need to reconcile for us. And so funders, power structures, powers that be, if you truly care about justice and equity and voting rights, you would speak up and you wouldn't remain silent. So what can we do? We have to use our voice, and we can't remain silent on issues that matter to the people who are most impacted by this. And Senator James Langford and everybody else who won't utter the words Black Lives Matter, they need to decenter themselves from our history. And it's sad when we can't own our own history and we have to follow suit to people who don't really give a damn about us. So, I hope that answers your question.
On the James Langford, you said what we can do is we can identify and call out those folks who have a blind spot. And when they have a blind spot, do what Dr. Crutcher and Councilor Hall-Harper said. You create your own table. Both of these women have created their own table. Councilor Harper insisting that we have an African-American Affairs Commission. Even there was pushback, and there are still people who are saying, why do we need it? And my answer, I'm not on that commission, full disclosure, but my answer is, if you have to ask that question, you've answered the question. We need it because without us advocating for ourselves, no one is. And so she created that table and she created those conversations with the mayor. And those are the things that we have to do because our elected officials have blind spots. So we have to shine a spotlight, use our megaphone, and these women have done that. And, you know, I'm working within the power structure just because, again, there has to be somebody inside the power structure advocating as well and making sure that our voices aren't ignored. And that's what we have to do. We all have to find our lane and make sure that people are looking at us and seeing us in the lens that we want to be seen.
And I will just say that, and we've created these tables and it hasn't come without sacrifice. Councilor Hall-Harper and I, we get death threats all the time, every day in our inboxes, and it's scary because we want to fight just for the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, I thought that was the American way, but it's difficult and it's challenging.
Councilor, you want to add anything to that topic?
I have nothing to add. Ditto. 100%. What both these ladies have said.
Okay, well, since we were on this sort of comparison of yesterday and today, I call it the tenuous tether, right, between yesterday and today. Let's talk about something that was in the news that Miss Alicia addressed for us recently, which would be Representative Brad Bowles, right? So we were talking a moment ago about how some things have changed and some things really haven't changed. And for a man to stand, for an elected official to stand on the House floor in Oklahoma City and use the phrase colored babies, right? Use the phrase colored babies on the House floor to refer to BIPOC children, and then attempted to reel it back. Right, Ms. Alicia, what was that experience like for you? And tell us, and maybe not everyone here. I don't want to assume everyone viewing knows what happened. So why don't you break that down for us?
So, Representative Brad Bowles from kind of the southern center part of the state was defending one of the over a dozen bills that are being presented on abortion in our state. He was defending that bill, and in a moment of passion, he stated a statistic and said, you know, I'm not just fighting for babies. You know, over 20% of colored babies are aborted every year, and I'm advocating for them too. So colored babies was egregious, but I don't need you to fight for me too, because that is, again, separating me and othering me. So there was so much wrapped up in that awful statement. And then when he was called aside by African-American legislators who said, yo, no, what do you, he said, I thought I was using the right term. This is 2021. This is a man who is younger than 40, who said that he thought that colored was an appropriate term. And then his apology, I mean, it was just insult on top of insult. His apology was that it was a slip of the tongue. My response is, you don't accidentally say colored babies, not in 2021. You accidentally say colored babies in public. You know, his apology was he got caught.
I said, maybe
we couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
Maybe it was his diabetes.
Oh, we haven't even gotten to that one yet. I mean, think about, it's been a 9-day, 2 weeks of just, I don't even know how to phrase it. I'm a writer and I don't even have the words to articulate what the last, really since January, right? Since the beginning of our first 3 Wednesdays, right? Insurrection, inauguration, impeachment. The first 3 Wednesdays of January, right? It feels like we're in the middle of March, and it's nonstop assault on BIPOC people, right? And I want to make sure that we acknowledge what happened in Atlanta yesterday. We're doing a story for Focus Black Oklahoma on the rise in hatred and racist hatred attacks on Chinese Americans and Jewish Americans. So I want to make sure we give love to folks from those communities, but it's been nonstop since January, right? Almost feeling like, well, I don't even know how to phrase it. Like it's a movement, right? Like what happened on January 6th was fuel to a fire that we all know, we're all old enough to know, has never gone away. But the conviction and the verve and the fierceness of it seems to, in my opinion, I'm interested in what you all think, is at a fever pitch, right? It's always been real, it's always been present. But there's something extra since January. Is it because Trump lost? Is it what's at the root of this?
I think it is. I think that's definitely a big part of it. I think that there is this power shift that's taking place, and it is scaring. We've talked about it, earlier on this talk. It is scaring the power structure as it exists today. Very fearful, and it's like, when you think about it, I mean, that's always been the case from the very founding of this country, right? I mean, we killed a lot of people, right? We massacred a lot of people. We enslaved millions of people to accomplish and to build what we know as America is today. Do you think we just getting ready to lay down and accept the change? No. And so, I mean, as long as that power structure is strong, that it's clear, that although we don't want to talk about it, it's unspoken, but as long as we know that white males are in control, we can then come around and sit around at tables and propose things that only amount to symbolism, right? That just maintains the status quo, and we can sing kumbaya. But when you start talking about and putting into action those initiatives, those policies that are going to actually change power, then all hell breaks loose. And that's what we're seeing with these voter suppression laws and those types of things, and so much other stuff. And so as my pastor would say, when you lift a rock off a snake, what does that snake do? That snake runs because he doesn't want to be exposed. He doesn't want to be uncovered. And so that's what I think we're seeing now, that what we were able to accomplish, a lot of BIPOC and people in this country, very influential in changing this status quo through our voting. And so they're going to attack that voting at every whim. And they're going to be unapologetic about it. They're going to be unashamed, because now it's serious, right? It's really serious. But when we can be undercover with it, right? When we can, let's go out to dinner and let's go golfing and all of these things, and make sure that we just keep maintaining this appearance of that we are on the same page, that we are a collective, that we collaborate, blah, 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 then that's fine. But when you're talking about making moves to actually change power, then all hell's breaking loose. And that's what we're seeing in legislation. That's what we're seeing when people are doing and saying the things that we see all over social media, that people are doing and saying. It's like we have to maintain our position of power in this country. We being the white European population of this country. And so it's fear. It is a fear that we want to maintain this status quo. We don't want to acknowledge that there are differences, right? That there are some people here and then some people here. We don't want to acknowledge that publicly because, hey, it's illegal to do that. But as long as it is unspoken, but certainly in existence, then that's the power structure that must be maintained when you're talking about the white society.
And I think you're right. It used to really be unspoken and hidden very, very well. However, I believe that when Trump got into office, he emboldened a lot of the outward facing. People didn't even think that it needed to be hidden anymore. I mean, we've had more and more white folks calling the police on Black folks for the smallest things, for children selling bottled water on the sidewalk, men bird watching, Black men running outside or going into their apartment where people don't feel that they should be able to live in a condo or something like that. And I think that Trump emboldened a lot of this. He emboldened a lot of the police brutality that took place, saying, hey, hit their heads on the car. And so I think that now what you're seeing taking place real time at the Oklahoma legislature with all of the bills that are being proposed and passed swiftly through the chambers to regress us back 100 years is really infuriating. I mean, last night there was a town hall, and you know, it wasn't about Black Lives Matter against the lawmakers. It was really, this is an attack on our democracy. It's an attack on our American freedoms and our right to do anything. I don't care if you're an anti-masker or a gun rights owner or a Black Lives Matter protester. I mean, they are actually really trying to roll back our constitutional rights with these bills, and it's alarming. And now we have to get prepared to fight some of this legally, and our taxpayers are going to have to pay for these, you know, just crazy bills. And so if they can't beat you at the ballot box, they're going to beat you, you know, as it relates to making laws and policies and putting them in place. And unfortunately, there's a super minority and a super majority, and the people who are on the right side of history are in the minority. But what we do have is our voice, and if we can't get it done through the people we elect, then we got to get to the ballot box. We got to get some ballot initiatives, and we have to just keep trying. And I come from the perspective of organizing and rallying people and mobilizing, because that's the fuel and the power to even get to a place where we can push real policy change. And Councilor Hall-Harper knows oh so well, I lived inside of City Hall, and I knew that it took our voices, our collective voices crying out to even get to a point where we're at the precipice of policy change. And so everyone has a role in this fight, but you know, we're in some trying times. And so I think that this is just a continuation in Trump. He's still lingering, and we have to figure out a way to decenter him. I believe that what you feed will grow, what you starve will die. We have to starve Donald Trump and stop giving him so much power and attention, and focus on some of the good things that are happening, and some of the community service work that's taking place, and override, like we did Juneteenth, override a lot of the hate with love and unity and community, and that's kind of where I am right now in my fight.
Ms. Alicia, can you speak to, I know we've all sort of talked about them, about the bills, and there's a slew of them, but they're the so-called Second Amendment sanctuary laws, right? And to me, right, they feel like a direct attack on our First Amendment rights, in addition to a variety of our civil liberties. Can you speak to that?
Well, first of all, so many of the bills that they're putting forth and passing, because they're in a supermajority, it's not even just to take us back 75 years. It's also to show us who's in charge. A lot of the bills that they're doing for the most deplorable reason, and it's because they can. And so some of these bills are so incredibly unconstitutional that we're going to go into debt further in debt as a state, fighting them, you know. And this sanctuary city, it's one of those where I think to myself, I'm not a gun owner, but I think to myself, be careful what you ask for. Because if you make the right so general, and so then you're going to look up and everybody's going to have a gun, and even the people that you don't want to have a gun. And so there are a lot of laws that they're passing to show us, but they're not recognizing that there are women like me, and there are people who are watching and paying attention, and we will assert ourselves in these laws, and they're going to turn out not in the way, because that is the plan for the next 2 years, is to say, oh, okay, I'll see you one and I'm going to up you one, because they are passing some egregious laws, and it's, in my opinion, it's more to show. It's like kicking over an anthill. They're all scrambling, and they have to reassert their power, and by passing these unconstitutional laws that they know will not stand, it's just sending a message. It's just sending a message, and it's sending a message to a certain voter. And it's also sending a message to the Democratic representation at the Capitol. They're saying, you know, you can put up your bills, but we're in control, we're in charge, and we'll hear the bills that we want to hear. The sanctuary city bill is not going to turn out the way that he hopes that it will turn out, because everyone is recognizing that they have a right to the Second Amendment. And I anticipate, even before it gets through the courts, that there will be a change in the next session. It is just, these are just, they're not even bills addressed at doing anything for Oklahoma except sending a message. And that's what's disappointing, because these people were elected.
And so you think, so you're telling me that one of the bills, right, and you all are aware of this, one of the bills says that if you are protesting in the streets and I'm in a car and I run you over, that I suffer no consequence for running you over. And you think that that's going to go away? You don't think that that's going to stick?
I think the first time that they try to apply this law, because all the person has to do is say they were afraid. It's Pandora's box. The way that the city, county, state will be sued will be out of this world. It is my hope, right? Because I attend to protest every once in a while. There's something that's important enough for me to get that on the street. It is my hope that we don't test this law before next cycle and we get an opportunity to overturn it. I don't have words for it, because this is unpublic, and all I can think of are curse words right now. That is an absolute insane bill, and the fact that it passed is, again, it's just sending a message. It is definitely targeting, it's not just protest, right? It's targeting our freedom of speech, but it's specifically targeting those who will utter the words Black Lives Matter. It is specifically saying, oh, if you think Black Lives Matter, let me show you. Because truly, I say this in parking lots, my car is bigger than you. Don't walk in front of my car. You do not have to turn into a protest. You see those people, you don't have to turn into a protest. I hope that it doesn't get tested. Our state can afford for it to get tested, frankly, notwithstanding the lives. I don't want anyone hurt, but our state can't afford this.
And I can't say that it won't get tested, because, if a situation arises, my job, my duty, my fight is to make sure that we speak up for the least of these, and to protest our right to life, our right to breathe. And so I can't say that it won't get tested. But what I can say is that we're working really, really hard to make sure that we get the support nationally and here locally to fight these bills. In the courts, there has been some of these policies in other states tested at the 10th Circuit. And so I do have some case law. I don't think it'll fly. But, first and foremost, we want for people to be safe, and we don't want for anyone to get hurt. But when it's time to rally cry, when it's time to protest, we're going to have to do it. And I can't help but think of John Lewis, whose skull was fractured, and they knew what they were facing, but they knew that they had to keep marching. Those women who marched, those Black women, for over a year during the Montgomery Bus Boycott, the young folks said, hey, you all are too old, sit down, get you some rest. And they said, we don't feel no ways tired. We got to keep marching. We got to keep fighting. We have to keep speaking if we're going to get some change in this country. And so I can't help but think about those folks who did it with water hoses and dog bites, and they did it in blood, and they did it in the face of Jim Crow lynching. And so if we got to keep taking it to the streets, we're going to test it out, and we're going to take it to the streets, and we're going to keep fighting. And so it's unconstitutional, and we need everybody who cares about life. If you're pro-life, you should be fighting these bills as well.
I know that people will be protesting. I'm just hoping that no one tests it and drives into the crowd. Like I said, I will take to the streets when I think it's important. So I know that people will be protesting. I just hope that no driver decides to test it.
I wanted to say one thing, and I also want to thank Ms. Andrews for correcting me about the black vote. because those are the things we need to call out when people like me make those kinds of errors. Or as a parenting publication editor, a lot of times I myself have encouraged my children or encouraged parents to take their children with them to some of these protests that they feel are important in their lives and reflect their values. So that bill made my blood run cold, that I would think that children, because this is one of the ways that we teach our children about peaceful disagreement and demonstration and what we are as a democratic society. So I feel that a bill like that, it sends chills through me, that a child could be injured at one of these protests that a parent takes a child to. But I just wanted to include that comment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Betty. I mean, and that's a very real thing. And thank you, Miss Alicia, and all of you for that, because again, I do believe that these bills are really attacks on our First Amendment rights, on our ability to what who can say what and where, right? But since you brought up young people, I do want to sort of wind down here talking about education and young people. So there is a bill that's currently on the floor. I think it may have passed. You can confirm. You all can confirm that for me. That is talking about reallocating funding and pulling monies from rural and urban schools and funding charter schools. I know Epic was specifically named, of course, but taking money out of rural and urban communities, like $7 million out of Tulsa, I think, or 3 million. One or the two, I get the numbers mixed up, between Tulsa and Oklahoma City. It was either 7 million for Tulsa or 7 million for Oklahoma City, or 3 million for Tulsa and 3 million for Oklahoma City. Either way, taking these money out of urban schools and rural schools and putting them into charter schools. And that passed too, right, Miss Alicia? Didn't that passed too, right? So when is that to be implemented? And how do you all think that's going to affect our children? They're already struggling.
I'm not sure, but I think that goes into effect in November. And this is just, there's an old saying that says that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour, in our country. The second most segregated time is school. I sell real estate, and I will tell you that schools are another way that people are segregating themselves in the United States. And this is just another way. They thought, okay, I'll move out far, and then I only have to send my kids to school with the people that I choose to send my kids to school with. And even that's being distorted. And so now they're like, well, I need my kids to go to a private school. I need to further segregate. And that's what's happening. It is like we're doubling down on Jim Crow days. And I fear that we're on pace for another teacher walkout, quite frankly, because it affects all the way. It affects, our kids in schools. It affects the grades and the scores, but it also affects teacher pay. And what they're doing is not sustainable. It's absolutely not sustainable. And I don't want to live in a time where kids don't have access to quality healthcare or education, or their quality of education is absolutely and forever bound by their zip code. And that's what we're moving towards, is that your education is bound by your zip code. And it's as if they don't even recognize that education is what determines our future. Or maybe they do, and they only want to secure a future for certain kids. It's disappointing. It passed. And when we're back in schools, I just think it's going to be very detrimental, particularly to inner city schools, particularly to schools of Black and brown kids. They're not going to get the resources because we've cut the money. They're not going to get the long-term teachers. There are a lot of deficiencies that bill is going to cause, and the level of disruption, it will have a ripple effect for decades.
Well, thank God the teacher walkout bill didn't pass. They had a bill proposed against the teacher walkouts as well, stating if teachers did that, they would lose their certification. But that didn't pass, thank God. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, yeah, they know exactly what they're doing. It's de facto segregation. And this is not the first time that it has been implemented. And they know the results. They know what those results are going to create at the end of the day. And that's why they're doing it. And so I don't think we're saying anything really new. Just like we've said on this call, we're going back to Jim Crow. And that's what was the result of Jim Crow? The power structure that we have today. And so they're going back to those same tactics. It's a Southern strategy. You familiar with the Southern strategy? That's what's being implemented, that Southern strategy. And so that's where we are, right? I call it the American way, and I call it the spirit of Oklahoma. This is certainly the practices that were put into place that created America, the America that we know today. But then what we're doing, even though we've made some improvements over the course of years, doing civil rights and so forth, now it's like, okay, we're getting too far, we're getting too progressive, too many people can potentially benefit, again, changing the power structure. So now we're going to revert back through legislation. It is the classic definition of institutionalized racism. It's institutional, right? They make laws that make it illegal to be fair and equitable. That's the classic definition of institutionalized racism and systemic racism. And that's what we're doing. So Oklahoma was one of 9 states that repealed affirmative action in 2012 through State Question 759, and it's memorialized in our Constitution. So what is it going to take to change that? Another vote of the people. So in other words, it's going to be very difficult to change that. And so we can talk, we get down here at the local levels, right? And we're talking about, we're going to put these programs in place, right? Small business enterprise program. We're going to put these initiatives in place to address disparities. But we know that we've already won the game, because at the state level, we have passed state legislative laws and memorialized them in such a way in our Oklahoma Constitution that it's almost near impossible to change. And so we know that this is as high as we will ever be able to go, right? And really achieving equity.
And then we
add, talk about that. And here's the deal, our regional chambers, right? These institutions that are part of the status quo, and the structure, the power structure, they know, they help fund, they support this legislation, because they know at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there's that ceiling. And so that's why I say it's a farce. That's why I say it's all symbolism. Because at the end of the day, if we really want it to be equitable in this state or in this country for that matter, we could do it like that. But that's not what's desired. It is not what's desired.
And so in addition to that, we are trying to block direct democracy, which is what I call ballot initiatives, right? So we ingrain these things in the Constitution, and then we make it near impossible for direct democracy. They're not representing us. And so we have this other way of getting our voices heard, and they're trying to also shut that down by making the ballot petition initiative even harder. Mm-hmm. So it's not even just institutional racism. They're like, oh, there's a hole over here. Let me plug that.
Right. That's right.
We are in complete control. Before we end, Q, I would be remiss if, because this is a panel on BIPOC voters, I want to say this out loud because I want people to get a hold of this information. In the last 2 years, the state of Oklahoma has purged at least 60,000 Native Americans off the voter roll. That's more than any other group. That's more than any other group. In the big purge of 2019, Native Americans represented 49% of the purged voters. it's not just, you know, a black and white fight, right? You mentioned this before. It's not just a black and white fight. It is an all out attempt, as Councilor Harper mentioned, an attempt to reinforce support and make sure that we retain a straight white male power structure. We're ejecting Native American voters at an insane rate off of the voter rolls. We are giving no attention to our AAPI community in Oklahoma, and we have very strong AAPI communities all over the state. There are all types of systemic racism, institutional racism that is being shorn up in 2020, 2021. It's not, these aren't remnants. They're going back and making sure that that whatever gains that are being made are reversed.
That's staggering. That's a staggering statistic, and I'll definitely get a story done on that for Focus Black Oklahoma. That's staggering. We are out of time, ladies, and we could go on. This conversation could go on for hours, and it would be compelling and edifying and educational. But it is 1 o'clock, and so and I know Dr. Tiffany Crutcher has a hard stop, and actually I do as well. And I don't want to take up all your time, but I'm grateful for your time. So we are grateful for your time. So Betty, you want to say anything?
I just want to thank all of you so much. This was a great conversation and so important, and it needs to be out there, and we need to hear more of it. We need more of this. I truly appreciate it. I want to thank OSU Tulsa, our panelists, Tri-City Collective, Quraysh, always. I want to thank you for your help with this. And if you, this will be on Tulsa Kids Facebook and also OSU Tulsa's Facebook if you'd like to watch it or you would like to share it with someone. So thank you so much, and keep speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, sisters. Thank you for the work that you do. Talk to you all soon.
I love you, ladies. Bye.